The emperor under whose reign Jesus was crucified was later said to have tried to make him a god. The Senate, the story goes, said no. We will come back to that. His name was Tiberius Caesar Augustus, Rome's second emperor. History gave him two labels: tyrant, monster. History left out the third one: victim. He ruled the greatest empire on earth from a small island where he refused to see anyone. For 11 years. He never came back. This is the story of what absolute power does to a broken man, and how the broken man created something far worse than himself. Before Tiberius was an emperor, he was one of the most successful generals Rome ever produced. Born 42 BC. His mother was Livia, the most politically dangerous woman in Rome. When he was still a child, Augustus took his mother Livia into his own household. His father was required to hand her over. It was the first time the empire reached into his life. It would not be the last. He spent 20 years on Rome's most dangerous frontiers: Germania, Pannonia, Illyricum. He didn't lose a single major campaign. The legions loved him. Augustus used him as a military instrument, sending him wherever the empire was bleeding. Then Augustus forced him to give up the woman he loved. Her name was Vipsania. They had a son together. By all accounts, Tiberius was genuinely in love with her. Augustus decided that Julia, his own daughter, needed a new husband for political reasons. Tiberius was ordered to divorce Vipsania and marry Julia. He obeyed. Suetonius records that he saw Vipsania once, by accident, after the divorce. He wept openly. He followed her through the street until his aides physically redirected him. Augustus made sure they were never in the same room again. The marriage to Julia was a disaster. She hated it. He hated it. Everyone in Rome knew it. In 6 BC, at the height of his power, Tiberius simply left. He sailed to the island of Rhodes. Retired. Studied philosophy. Refused all official duties. Nobody walked away from the empire. Tiberius did. He stayed away for 7 years. And that was before the losses began. When Augustus finally called him back and named him heir, Tiberius stood before the Senate. In Tacitus' account, he tried to give the power back. He offered to govern only a portion of the provinces, and asked them to govern themselves. The Senate refused. They had forgotten what governing themselves looked like. Augustus died in 14 AD. Tiberius was 55 years old. He had spent 30 years being used, moved, and manipulated by the man now lying dead. And now the empire was his. He didn't want it. He took it anyway. And for a while, he was good at it. In his first decade, Tiberius ran Rome efficiently. No unnecessary wars. Sound finances. Suetonius records that Tiberius left Rome's treasury in a state Augustus had never achieved, vast and untouched. He refused to be worshipped as a god. He wrote back to a senator who asked for guidance on every small decision. He behaved like a man who believed an emperor should serve the state, not be served by it. But something was already wrong. He despised flattery. He distrusted the Senate. He once left a session in disgust after senators proposed naming a month after him. He said, "What will you do when there are 13 Caesars?" Rome interpreted reluctance as contempt. The grudges began. His name was Germanicus, Tiberius's adopted son. Rome's most beloved general, handsome, brilliant, popular with every legion he commanded. He died in 19 AD. He was 33 years old. And almost immediately, people started saying Tiberius had him killed. Germanicus had accused the governor of Syria, Gnaeus Piso, of sabotaging his command. Then Germanicus died of a mysterious illness. His wife Agrippina publicly accused Tiberius. Piso was brought to trial for murder. Before the verdict was delivered, Piso was found dead. His death was called suicide. Rome did not believe it. Whether Tiberius ordered Germanicus's death, historians still debate. Tacitus believed it. Modern scholars are far less certain. What is certain, Tiberius lost his heir, his reputation, and the goodwill of Rome, in the same year. Into the void stepped Sejanus, commander of the Praetorian Guard. Tiberius's closest advisor. The man Tiberius would eventually call the partner of my labors. The man he trusted more than anyone alive. The man who was already destroying him from the inside. According to Tacitus, Sejanus had begun an affair with Livilla, Tiberius's daughter-in-law, wife of his son Drusus. And together, according to Tacitus, they were slowly poisoning Drusus. Not quickly. Carefully. Drusus died in 23 AD. The cause appeared to be illness. Tiberius buried his son and promoted Sejanus. He had now lost his adopted son and his biological son. His wife was dead. His mother Livia died in 29 AD, the last person powerful enough to check Sejanus. And Sejanus was only getting started. In 26 AD, Tiberius left Rome. He sailed to Capri, an island off the Bay of Naples. Sheer cliffs on every side. One approach road. Impossible to reach undetected. He never returned to Rome. Not once. In 11 years, Sejanus ruled the city in his name. Statues of Sejanus appeared across Rome. He held the consulship. He controlled who could reach the emperor. He began removing Tiberius's family members one by one, the heirs who might threaten him. He was effectively emperor. Except he wasn't. Because Tiberius was still watching. From Capri. And he was planning. In 31 AD, Tiberius sent a letter to the Senate. Sejanus was told it contained great news. A major honor. Possibly the power that would make him co-emperor. Sejanus arrived at the Senate surrounded by supporters. The letter was read aloud. It began with praise. Then qualifications. Then more praise. Then more qualifications. Senators began reading the room. By the end of the letter, Sejanus was under arrest. He was dragged out and executed that same evening. His body was thrown into the street. The Roman mob tore it apart for 3 days. His children were executed. Ancient sources say his daughter was violated first. Roman law forbade executing a virgin, and then strangled. His statues were pulled down across the city. And then, years after Drusus was buried, another report arrived on Capri. An informant revealed the truth. According to Tacitus, Sejanus and Livilla had poisoned Drusus together, deliberately, carefully, while Tiberius mourned his son and promoted the man who killed him. He had buried his son, mourned him, moved on, and the entire time, the killer had been sitting across the table, receiving promotions, being called the partner of his labors. Rome expected the old Tiberius to return after Sejanus fell. Something far worse emerged instead. The Villa of Jupiter. Later writers imagined it with 12 great rooms, one for each Olympian god. The most powerful address on earth, and no one could reach it without permission. This is where Rome's emperor spent the last 11 years of his life. Suetonius records this story. A fisherman managed to scramble up the cliff and approach Tiberius without warning. He wanted to give the emperor a gift, a large mullet he had caught. Tiberius ordered his guards to scrub the man's face raw with the fish. As they did, the man cried out that it was lucky he hadn't brought the large crab he'd also caught. Tiberius sent for the crab, and had his face torn open with its claws. Back in Rome, the treason trial spiraled. Ancient writers claim men could be condemned for absurd offenses. A coin mishandled near a portrait of the emperor. A careless gesture near an imperial statue. Informers were rewarded. The Senate was paralyzed. Suetonius records that Tiberius issued an edict against the customary public kiss of greeting, banning it across the empire. Ancient writers don't agree on why he did it. Modern scholars who study Tiberius use careful language. They describe a man who spent decades under extreme stress, campaigns, political manipulation, forced marriage, repeated bereavement. A man who sealed himself away from the world that had taken everything from him. And in that isolation, with no one left to check him, the darkness he had controlled for 50 years finally had no reason to hide. But there was one person on Capri watching everything. And he was learning. While Tiberius sat on Capri, in a distant province called Judea, a Roman governor named Pontius Pilate crucified a man named Jesus. The execution was routine. Thousands of people were crucified under Roman law. But according to the early church writer Tertullian, Pilate sent a report to Tiberius. And Tiberius, according to that account, took it to the Senate and proposed making Jesus a god of Rome. The Senate refused. The man on the cross became a religion that outlasted the empire. We hold this carefully, Tertullian wrote over a century after the fact, and most historians treat it as legend. But it is worth knowing the story exists. The person watching everything from Capri was Caligula, son of Germanicus, Rome's last surviving popular heir. He had survived the purge of his family by becoming invisible, agreeable, unthreatening. Suetonius wrote of him, "There was never a better slave or a worse master." Tiberius saw it. Tacitus records that Tiberius looked at Caligula holding his grandson Gemellus, and said, "You will kill him, and another will kill you," to Caligula's face, then named him heir anyway. March 16, 37 AD. Tiberius fell ill and appeared to stop breathing. Caligula took the imperial ring. The household began congratulating him. Rome prepared to celebrate. Then Tiberius opened his eyes. He called for food. According to Tacitus and other hostile sources, Macro entered the room and smothered Tiberius with his own bedclothes, while Caligula watched. The streets of Rome erupted. To the Tiber with Tiberius. The Senate refused to deify him. He was 77 years old. The reluctant emperor. The brilliant general. The grieving father. The man who ran Rome from an island he never left. The man who raised the monster that came after him. Within months of taking power, Caligula had his co-heir Gemellus killed. The prophecy Tacitus records Tiberius speaking to his face. Fulfilled. Tiberius had seen what Caligula was. He raised him anyway. And Rome paid for it in blood. Caligula is waiting. You already know what's coming. Subscribe to Rome's Dark Throne. Every empire has secrets.